And does anybody know who Steven Soderbergh is? No? No, that's fine. Alright, so he's a director. Directors usually, their job is to answer questions, but he's also very technical and he does a lot of things. He can, he holds camera, he edits his own work, he produces it, he writes it. And you're going to figure out why I'm talking about this guy in a second here. Perhaps you've seen one of these movies. Some of these are really, really popular, especially the Oceans, everybody can see, Oceans 11 through 12 movies are super popular. Magic Mike is another one of his things. But it's like kind of a very eclectic mix of kind of art house films, but then also very mainstream. So that's kind of what he does. And I'm going to start by talking about the first movie he made. It's called Sex, Lives, and Videotape. And he wrote this when he was 26 in 8 days. And it released in 1989 at Cannes Film Festival. And it actually, the reason Quentin Tarantino's a thing, or any like Kevin Smith or the Coen brothers or any kind of like independent filmmakers that became big in the 90s, and the reason they exist is because of this guy. Because with this movie that he wrote in 8 days, and that was supposed to be a softcore porn movie, it kicked off the independent film scene, the whole thing, right? And it was not only critically successful, but it was also commercially successful. And he wins the Palme d'Or at that time, which is kind of like, this is even bigger than the Oscars, because it's like the real artistic award that you would want to kind of win. Like, it's more so than Oscars, it would be like Berlin or the Palme d'Or. These are the kind of film festivals that are, filmmakers actually, they really want to win. And famously, while he's being compared to Orson Welles, because he's 26, Orson Welles was 25 when he made Citizen Kane, he says it can only go downhill from here. And this is exactly what happened. Because for the next 9 years, he failed terribly. And you can see here kind of the budgets.
Damn.
So, first one he makes, 1991, after his success, right, loses a lot of fucking money, $10 million, right? And just bomb after bomb. Not only bombs, like, no one saw this, no one liked it. Critical bombs and commercial bombs. So, most people here are artists, and the thing is, especially when you're younger and you do something really impressive, you get heaped with a lot of praise, and people have a lot of expectations of you. Mm. So, when you're in this rut, this kind of thing, back-to-back failures, it's really, really hard to get the right perspective. But what he did to get himself out of this rut, I think, is actually kind of genius. Because he went back to his roots with these two movies here. So, you can see the budgets keeps going down, but this is by design, where eventually the budgets are like $250,000, because he went back to his hometown, and he started working with the same people that he kind of came up with, that he knew in high school, that he was making movies with in college and all that stuff. And what he realized, really, is that he was too much of a perfectionist. He took what he did way too seriously. And what he needed to do to change, really, was not only go back to his roots, but introduce levity and fun and be fearless with what he's doing. And also, lower budget, lower risk, right? So this is what he did for 2 years. He made these things, and it was really good learning experience. Because what happened next is he meets this guy, George Clooney, which I think everybody knows who George Clooney is, right? George Clooney, at the time, was also kind of a dark horse, right? Just like Steven Soderbergh was. Because Clooney was really good on television, in the show ER. But he sucked on the big screen. He was not commercially successful in like actual movies. So Batman and Robin, Joel Schumacher, that came out in 1997. People hated this movie, like so much, right? And it actually killed like comic book movies during the 90s for a bit. That's like how bad it was. So no one knew how to use George Clooney. He had this innate charisma that only Steven Soderbergh kind of understood. This charm, right? So these two get together and they make this movie. And now there's a profit here, right? but it's also, the other thing is, it's like really critically successful. So this is kind of a comeback. It's the start of a comeback. And you're going to see how far this comeback comes. Because next, he rises like a phoenix, right? So in this year, I forget the exact year, it's like the early 2000s, right? These two movies come out. And you might not recognize them, but at the time, they were extremely big hits. Like really, really big. To the point where he was nominated for 2 Oscars, third director for that to ever happen to. One of them, Orson Welles, who he was compared to at the beginning of his career, right? And he goes to the Oscars and he thinks that he's not going to lose because the vote is going to be split naturally because both of his movies, he has to get more votes for both his movies or one of his movies in order, you know how to split votes works. Mm-hmm. But basically, he's also like up against like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, The Gladiator. People think for sure he's going to lose. He thinks he's going to lose. He didn't even write an acceptance speech, and he wins. He won the Oscar for Best Director that year, and he just goes on to have like a tremendous career from that point forward, right? Coming back from complete abject failure to, having a really good footing. So I'm going to compare him to Quentin Tarantino. And bear with me here. Okay, so Tarantino famously says that he's only going to make 10 movies, right? And I think Tarantino is anybody who's like really into movies, when they get into movies, they look to like guys like Tarantino or Stanley Kubrick, who are infamous perfectionists, right? But I think the problem with this kind of thinking here is that Tarantino is ruled by fear because he is too precious about his oeuvre, right? That he's worried that if he makes one bad movie, that is a reflection on everything he's made before that and a reflection on him, and in the annals of history, he is going to be a bum and forgotten. To the point where 10 movies, if he gets older in a certain age, he's not willing to take that risk. And he's not willing to spoil what, the critical and successful role that he's had. Soderbergh is fearless. He's not precious about it. He's extremely prolific. He puts out movies. He'll make a movie with a cell phone, right, an iPhone, and then he'll do that all in like a couple weeks. He shoots it himself, and then he edits the movie, and he has the first rough cut done within 3 hours after finishing the shoot, right? That's like he just wants to make as much stuff as possible. So, and he's also not a foot fetishist like Tarantino. He's a foot fetishist. Okay, so another example is, you might know this guy. I'm talking about directors who start out really hot and then kind of squander it, right? With perfectionism or this is for this guy, I mean. So this guy is Richard Kelly, and he made this movie Donnie Darko. And this is kind of like a cautionary tale, right? Because what he did is this movie was really, really big. It's still really famous. I'm sure a lot of people have seen this movie. Commercially successful, artistically successful, critically successful. Then he makes this huge, terrible bomb, like really, really bad movie. And he could have continued to make movies after this, and he did, but he got utterly consumed with this movie in particular, to the point he's like writing a comic book universe for it. He wrote a book. He tried to get a sequel greenlit. He recut it like 3 or 4 different times, and he's been doing that for the past 30 years. He's stuck on this movie that he genuinely believes is just misunderstood genius, right? And it's been 30 years, and people don't hear about Richard Kelly anymore. So this is kind of the overall message that I come to sort of consider, right? Because when you kind of get into movies, it's Tarantino, it's guys like Kubrick that you look to, right? Guys with these perfect resumes. But really, I think you start to appreciate guys like Soderbergh a little bit more. People who are kind of, they just, they're not crap, like they're movies, but they're just not super precious about it, and they make good stuff, and they trust their original instincts. Because really, when you start doing something, you realize it doesn't matter how much I keep retrying to do it, my first instinct is usually what you're gonna go back to, right? So don't overthink. You know, trust your first instincts. Don't be precious about your work. Be humble. This is the thing about Soderbergh, is he's very humble about what he's, and I think that kind of goes into him being able to disconnect his, you know, his body of work from who he is, and it's just like this kind of like workmanship that I've come to really appreciate about him. And be free. He consistently breaks rules, and he films everything himself. He does things, and this is one of the things he says here, is like, energy is more important than perfection. Perfection is boring. What's exciting is something that is alive, and things that are alive have flaws. So he constantly makes these mistakes on purpose, like first year film student mistakes, a jump cut on a long shot, you know, and like 3 of them in a row, right? So that's kind of where I think this is the last slide. But yeah, I really dig Steven Soderbergh. I was talking about him to a friend of mine, and that's kind of how I got the. So I'm gonna, myself, I have been a perfectionist. So it's kind of personal, where this is kind of the thinking that I'm going with now. But yeah, that's it. Any questions?
I actually had a question. I noticed that when he had his first, you could consider it his first success after his previous success, the budget was in the tens of millions all of a sudden.
Yeah.
How did that, if you know, how did that happen? How did he go from low budget to suddenly, I think it was 18 million or something?
So for his first movie, the movie right afterwards?
Can we go back a few slides? We'll
Yeah.
show you the slide.
The one with George Clooney.
Oh, the one with George Clooney.
Yeah.
So actually, for that movie, he had to campaign. They were going to make that movie anyway because they were remaking a bunch of.
Yeah.
If you heard of the movie Jackie Brown, it's another Tarantino movie, and it's written by the same author, Elmer Leonard, and they were making a lot of Elmer Leonard movies at the time. I think it was actually Miramax, Weinstein, that did it. So this was going to have this budget anyway. Soderbergh and Clooney had to campaign to get themselves on the slate for those movies, right? And actually Soderbergh, when they were considering who's going to direct, he was 10th on the list, right? So he got really lucky, and like it was Clooney, and like they knew another big actor out there, but that was going to have that budget anyway.
Would you say that even though it had that massive budget and that major backing, did it still represent that new approach of returns?
Yes, because he said specifically that he knew if he fucked this up that he would be in director's jail for probably the rest of his life. But he couldn't be afraid of that. Because if he was afraid of that, he wouldn't be able to be free and do the things that he wanted, have that levity that he started to introduce into his movies. That I think is the thing that made it, the energy that he talks about, the fun kind of thing, right? So, yeah, he just, I guess he compartmentalized it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, yeah, this might happen, but I'm not gonna think about that. I'm just gonna try and have fun and be free, kind of thing.
Good answer.
Duncan.
So one thing I noticed is that I've seen a lot of this guy's movies, like Contagion, Ocean's 11, and everything, and they're great.
Huh.
But this might just be my ignorance, but I've never heard of this guy.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that plays into his humbleness too, because I feel like I don't see him as like an auteur director in the same way like a Scorsese or a Tarantino or a Kubrick, where like the name is inseparable from the things he's made, whereas this, like his name kind of bleeds into the background and it's just about the movie itself that he's making.
I think you're totally right.
Yeah.
So he says that basically he decided early on that he wasn't going to be a brand, right? So with every movie that he does, you can't really sense a fingerprint on it. So every movie he does, he approaches it based on the material and what he thinks the best approach for that movie is. And as a consequence, it's real. Even if you watch all of his movies, if you don't know it's his movie, it's kind of hard to guess.
Yeah.
Right. And he does other things, like he'll hide his name in the credits. Like he uses his mom's name when he edits a movie, or he uses his dad's name when he writes it. So he's just kind of he's just a workhorse. He just wants to make stuff. He likes he's known as an innovator because he'll do things like the cell phone, or he'll change the distribution model for certain things. And he's just, I don't know, he's like a tinkerer. kind of
Yeah.
more so than like wanting to be a personality.
Yeah, and I think that's really admirable.
I think so as well.
Because there's so much mystique in like the auteur director, where like this big name that's associated with all these masterpieces. Whereas like he's not going for any kind of specific style inherent to him. He's just trying to make the best movie he can make for whatever the subject matter is that he's working with.
Exactly that. And then he says that he doesn't want to be pigeonholed because as soon as if he's a brand, that kind of pigeonholes him, right? Which, yeah, I mean, I think that there's some good sense there. It's just, as a consequence, he's not going to be as famous as Tarantino. Anybody else?
Can I see the last quote again?
Yeah.
Last slide.
For sure. There you go.
Energy is more important than perfection. Perfection is boring. What's exciting is something that is alive, and things that are alive have flaws. Yeah, that's a great quote. I really like that one.
It's really good.
Yeah, because no one wants to see perfect art. They want to see art that communicates something about the person making it and something about humanity. And yeah, so I think that's all true. And humans aren't perfect. Why do you think people like Quentin Tarantino?
Actually, I think that Quentin Tarantino's movie has a sort of rough around the edges quality. I don't think that they're perfect either. Like he'll do like, but I think there's the sense of movies during the '90s is that they, especially the independent scene, is that they kind of have this handmade quality to them, which was kind of I think in the '90s a really. You see it not only in movies, you see it in music. Like if you watch like the music video for like Beck, Loser, it looks like a home movie, right? It's this kind of tactile quality that's like homemade. Or made by something achievable by pretty much anybody. I think it kind of like similar thing to. But why did was it Tarantino?
Yeah.
Why did people like Tarantino? I think Tarantino really understands storytelling, and more so than any other thing with filmmaking. He understands also how people are going to react to what is called just like set pieces, where like certain sequences. He knows how to build up the tension and bring it up to a point where, like, once he releases it, it's like it's very memorable. He has usually like 3 or 4 sequences just like that like are big explosive ones, like the Jews under the cupboard scene at the beginning of Inglourious Basterds. Yeah. So there's that.
How many movies has he made so far?
Who's Soderbergh?
Tarantino.
Tarantino.
So he has one movie left.
He has one movie left that he's gonna do. Yeah.
How many of them have been written out of history, so we don't know.
Oh, what do you mean?
He's probably made movies and gone, I don't want that to count.
Yeah, that doesn't go.
Because that's so much extra pressure too. It's like because now it's his last one.
Yeah, then you can't make any after.
He counts Kill Bill as it's 2 movies, but he counts it as one.
Well, okay, I can see it.
And then he's written stuff and he's given the script to people.
Yeah.
So
Probably an insult when he does that.
say again.
It's like, I want this to be one of my 10. Take it.
Take it. Yeah, it's not good enough. Yeah. All right. So I think that's it.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah.
How are you going to apply this kind of filmmaking to your own work?
I
Yeah,
was
that's
like
a good
fearlessness,
question.
really. That's the kind of thing that's like I just want to post as much as possible going
Yeah.
forward, and not like
Because your videos are quite crisp.
Yeah. I mean, recently for sure, but I'm done with it. I'm done. I just
Okay.
want to kind of make fast. I want to make good stuff, but I want to do it faster.
Punkier.
Yeah. More freedom, basically. Have fun again. Been having fun, but more fun.
Did you get into a perfectionistic trap with your last one?
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Big time. But I'm glad I did it. It's like biggest thing I've ever done in my life. So
Yeah.
I'm happy I did it.
I feel like a year ago.
Year and a half.
It's gonna be over 2-hour video.
30 minutes. Yeah. So yeah,
It's a movie.
it's a movie. That was my intention, was to make a movie.
It's wild.
Yeah. $30,000 it cost to make that.
Wow.
Wow.
Crazy.
It's never gonna make that money back. Like,
So you just made a piece of art. It's okay.
that was the point. Yeah.
I mean, maybe
Yeah.
you'll get a $38 million budget coming up.
Yeah, maybe.
That would be nice. But yeah, okay. Sweet. All right.